Boston College didn't just land a coach's son, they landed a winner. Jett Watson's commitment about toughness, IQ, and reach. And it says a lot about what Bill O'Brien is building at Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. On today's show, we're going to dive into Jett Watson, the new commitment. My name's AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider. I've been covering Boston College for 10 years. We're going to talk about what Jett Watson means, how this impacts the defensive back room, and what's next for Bill O'Brien and this team. So on Friday, Boston College had mixed news in terms of the recruiting world, as quarterback Will Wood committed to Penn State, which was tough news, and we'll talk about that later. But they also landed Jett Watson. Jett Watson is a defensive back, a 5'11 defensive back from Buford, Georgia. And if you look at the last name, Jett Watson, you hear the name, it probably rings a few bells, as it should, because he is the son of general manager Kenyatta Watson, who also played at Boston College. Now, this addition is much more than just grabbing a coach's son, because Jett Watson is more than that for a few different reasons. And let's talk a little bit about that. Jett plays at Buford High School, Grayson High School, in Georgia. Grayson is one of the best programs in the country. You know, they're always near the top in terms of college football and high school football. They're sending tons of kids to the NFL, sending tons of kids to college football, and many of the major programs. And you look at a kid like Jett. He's coming from this program, a program with a history, one that his dad worked for. And you look at what other programs were looking at him, and you can see this is way more than nepotism, because Jett is very, very talented. He has offers from Arkansas, Auburn, Indiana, national champion Indiana, Kansas State, Missouri, NC State, UNC, Pitt, Texas Tech. Like, a lot of big programs really wanted him. He's rated an 86, a 3-star. So yes, you don't get your 4-star here, but a kid with an offer list like this, for many folks, really checks a lot of boxes. You're getting a guy that was nationally recruited, a guy that got attention from the SEC, which was in his backyard, attention from the ACC, which was in his backyard, and still chose Boston College. Yes, I'm sure his father being there probably was a factor in why he chose BC. But regardless, this is a commitment that you can't overlook. This is a commitment that means something to Boston College. I like what he does. Now, you're looking at this class and you're looking at what Jett can do. One specific style and one particular attribute just jumps off the chart for me, and that is his speed. You know, when you're bringing in defensive backs, you want a good mix. You want physical ones like you have with like Chandler Jordan. You want speedsters like you have with TJ Green. Jett runs a 4.36 20 shuttle. He runs a 4.41 40-yard dash, like really, really good speed. And that's what you want to see out of your defensive backs. You want to have some guys out there that you can put on an island against a Clemson wide receiver or against a solid NC State wide receiver and be able to keep pace with them. Speed kills in college football. So to get guys that are talented, that can stop that kind of stuff, that's super important. And Jett has that. Now, when you're looking at, what this means to the staff, I think one big deal that we kind of made about all of this when we were first looking at Kenyatta Watson was you saw him make a number of offers in the state of Georgia and Florida. These are his, where he makes his bones, right? This is where Kenyatta Watson is like well known. He's a Southern recruiter. And the hope was that Watson, knowing, as I mentioned earlier, Buford, Grayson, some of these other schools, Gwinnett in Georgia, and then schools in Florida, would help BC get those recruits, because yes, you will always have a few Massachusetts and New York recruits that are just good. And obviously, New Jersey always brings some good ones. But let's be realistic. When you're looking at what states provide the most college football players drafted or whatever, Georgia's always either one or two. So to get involved there and to get talent is important. And it felt like that was a state for a while. BC really fell behind in. You had Al Washington under Steve Adazio, who did a lot there, and you had a smattering here or there, but it really took. Obviously Bryce Lewis committed last year, and Marcellus Townsend, but those guys knew Tim Lewis. They were, obviously Bryce is his son. Tim Marcellus Townsend is his teammate. That was a different story. Now you're looking at the rank at what they've done, and you have Jett Watson, you have Armani Hill, you have Magnus Tama, all three from those states, and there's more probably to come. There's Jace German, a quarterback from Georgia. There's other guys that are already setting up official visits to Boston College from those states. When you're looking at a guy like I had him right in front of me. Christian Walcott, a defensive lineman, or Joshua Eccles, Sagarian Gunsby, Blaze Battaglia. Like, there's a lot of Georgia and Florida guys that this is looking towards. And yes, you may just be looking at me saying all this and saying, AJ, it's the coach's son, who cares? And I get that. But it should start to show you a pattern that's starting to emerge where BC's starting to get more and more involved in guys in that area. And this is just the latest. Okay. When you're talking about BC and you're talking about losing recruits or things like that, what's the thing that always comes up? It's always money. And now it's money. And this team had a tough year last year. Jett Watson, if he really did not believe, he could have gone somewhere else. I'm sure another school could have probably, especially the SEC, probably could have paid him more. But he really believe what BC is doing. He said as much to my reporter who covered, the 247 reporter that covered him for my site. Like, this is a guy that wants to be here. And I think the reach for BC's staff is really starting to show. It's you're missing a few guys here in Massachusetts, but this isn't a heavy Massachusetts class. Like Bork, the quarterback, he was not very really recruited by BC. And there's a few other guys, but like BC isn't in on those guys. And it's not because they just shut the door on it. It's just not the best fit. So getting some national reach to build on the smaller class, to get these players in here is important. And Jett Watson is a nice addition to this class. And we'll get to see what he does for Grayson next year, how he performs and how he looks. In a moment, I want to talk about what this position does in terms of the defensive backs in the future. What's the next steps? What's going to happen next? We'll get into all of that in just a moment. If you've ever opened your bank account and thought, where did all my money go? You're not alone. Keeping track of subscription spending and bills can get overwhelming fast. That's where Rocket Money comes in, helping you take control of your finances all in one place. Look, I wanted to save for Rocket Money. I want to save for a vacation. And I was looking at my spending and I'm able with Rocket Money to, pinpoint what spots in my life I'm spending too much on, cutting back on that, instead stashing it for a vacation. It's going to pay off for me. It's going to pay off for my family. I love it. It helped me really get control when things are, there's so many things going on in the world in terms of how you're spending your money. It's hard to keep track of that. And that's where Rocket Money really pays off. So check out Rocket Money right now. Go get your personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Hey, folks, this is AJ Black, And I want to shout out every one of you. It's the off season, but you're still diehard Boston College fans. You're graduates. You've grown up in the area. You grew up just loving BC sports, and you are part of my everydayer crew. You listen. You want to know what's going on with basketball, what's going on with Luke Murray, what's Bill O'Brien. Well, I have a special opportunity for you, and this is our everydayer club. You get text messages from me. You get access to our Discord, which is starting to blow up. This is our group chat where people can chat. I'm diving in there every now and then to talking BC sports. I think you'll enjoy that. And you get ad-free shows. If you're tired of listening to me read ads, it's a great opportunity for you. All you need to do is sign up. There's two different tiers. There's the basic tier and there's premier tier. If you want the Crown Vic of my podcast, you got to try out the Everydayer Club in the all access tier. If you want just, to support the podcast, do a little extra, check out the basic tier. I think you'll like both. I think you should try it out by going to lockedonbostoncollege.supercast.com. Again, it's lockedonbostoncollege.supercast.com today. I'm going to leave that little promo code down there so that you can sign up while I'm chatting here, because I want to continue talking about Jett Watson. Again, a 3-star recruit from Grayson, Georgia, who committed to Boston College on Friday. Now, the defensive back position is an interesting position, and I think it really kind of tells a story that's similar to a lot of positions on campus, where you have a lot of players with a lot of eligibility left. You're looking at a defensive back room that brought in last year a huge class. And I'm positive I'm probably going to forget somebody, but I'm going to try my best. You brought in Nita Sinkala, you brought in Marcus Upton, Marcellus Townsend, TJ Green, Ashton Cunningham, and that's where you're Omarion Davis, but he's gone. Then this current year, you brought in a Gerald Green, Dejon Green, and the Jordan Rodriguez. You have a ton of young talent in the defensive backfield. You also have Jackson Tucker committed from Catholic Memorial, Max's younger brother, who's supposedly really talented. So when you're looking at the defensive back output and what things are looking at, you have those recruits, but you also have transfers. And of any position, I thought BC kind of took a back seat a little bit in the cornerback room in transfers. They were obviously linked to the cornerback that ended up at Rutgers. We don't know what happened there. We have Chandler Jordan from Georgia State, who's a redshirt sophomore, excuse me. And then you had Cam Howard from Alabama. So you have two with all those younger players, and you only have a few older players that could be aging out soon. Guys like Carter Davis, KP Price, Max Tucker, Isaiah Ferris, and Cam Martinez. Those are like your older statesmen that we'll have to wait to see what happens. Because when we're talking about future classes, I get this feeling, and I wonder how the staff feels about this too. It's hard to gauge what you have, because of the portal and change in an instant. That's nothing new. But we're all waiting on this 5-for-5 ruling to come down. It seems inevitable that we're going to have guys allowed to have 5 years of eligibility. Well, that's going to screw everything up, because if you're counting on, just throw a name out, Max Tucker to graduate, and you have a guy already coming in for that slot, but then Max Tucker gets an extra year, what do? How do you plan for this? It's crazy. So the bigger point of all of this is, I think defensive back, you'll see a few other names pop up here or there, but I think BC is probably going to keep this group small, because they went overboard a couple of years ago, and there's only so much room with all these new regulations, with the 105 roster spots, with the 5-for-5. It's really tricky you can't overload at a position. I got people yelling, saying things online like, why aren't they going extra on the offensive line? Well, it's like, they can't, because they don't have enough space for it. You can't just magically find spots anymore. That kind of funny math is gone. You are stuck at 105, preferred walk-ons, scholarship guys. They're all in the same boat. That's it. So BC has to be careful here. They cannot go out and go overboard at a position that they feel confident that they're set for multiple years, and they should be. Like, you look at Marcellus Townsend. This is a guy that could be starting next year for, in 2026. He's going to have 4, potentially 5 years remaining because he got redshirted last year. He started, I think it was the Fordham game, and then he got hurt. So his year is a redshirt year. You're going to probably get 4 years out of him because that's, if the 5 for 5 thing happens, that'll probably count as one. So, but you still got 4 years out of him. You have potentially 4 years out of Ashton Cunningham, 4 years out of TJ Green. Like, you see what I mean? It does limit what you're doing, and this is why when I say BC's taking a smaller class, a lot of these factors come into that. They brought in a lot of guys in the transfer portal. Most of them are going to have multiple years. You look at any position, and the guys that they brought in, for the most part, are developed. They've played a year or two here, but they've got multiple years of eligibility, which kind of takes back a little bit the size of this class. And that's fine. It's a new way of looking at the new world of college football. It's a new way of addressing how your roster is built. Because if you just go in, you're just the old way, which is high school recruiting all the way, you're going to end up like Dabo Swinney. And Dabo Swinney is in charge of a program with a lot of resources, and he is not doing, what I don't think, the best job of allocating and envisioning how his program could work at the best, highest possibilities that they could do. I think Dabo Swinney is a bit of a dinosaur right now, and he's trying to dig himself out of it, but is it too late? This is what Bill O'Brien cannot afford to do. He was aggressive in the portal. He's still aggressive in the true freshman, but I wonder to myself, does this mean we will not see recruiting classes at BC of 27, 26, like we've seen in the last couple of years? I think it was 2 years ago that they had that. It seems like the age, it's gone the way of disco, right? It's not, I don't think it can exist anymore. So this is just another example. Jett Watson's here, and you have to look at slots. What can BC realistically bring in that's not going to mess up another position? Like, if BC is feeling right now, linebacker, for instance, that they want to build out the linebacker position, they already have one commitment. They've got a couple guys that they're looking at. What if one of them commits and you want 2? You have to have the space for that. And so you do not want to go into a season like you did last year, where there's maybe a position that is just really, really thin. So this is why a commitment like Jett Watson is important to think about, just in terms of the general picture of everything. What does BC kind of have on their roster, and what kind of slots they're going to have left? I think maybe one more defensive back. I could see maybe one more, because when you're looking at the offers that are out there, I think there's still at least one more guy that they're going to probably want to take. And so that's going to be something to watch for. In our final segment, now that you have this in, what's next and what happened with Will Wood? We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Wrapping things up here, Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. And if you're looking for a second listen, let me tell you about Locked On ACC. It's a great podcast with Alex Donald and Kenton Gibbs. They're talking all things Atlantic Coast Conference. You may agree with them, you may hate them, but they're going to get you talking. Check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, the biggest question is, what's next? Now, one answer that we can give you is it won't be Will Wood, the quarterback from Zavarian Brothers, as he committed to Penn State on Friday. Now, I had a crystal ball in at 247 for that, because it just seemed, and things I had heard, was that it was close. And close doesn't count unless it's hand grenades or horseshoes. But you had Will Wood, he ended up picking Penn State. Now, he had family out there. I get that, and then there's it's Penn State versus BC. That's a tough road to climb, especially after a 2-10 season. Even though the state has, they failed last year too, they have a history, and that's harder to overcome. So the big question is, what's next at quarterback? and I've given you names before, guys like Kason Myers, Jace German, J.D. Brown, Will Jackson, a quarterback from Florida. These are all names to keep an eye on. I would be surprised. I know J.D. Brown has already set his official visit, so has Jace German. Will Jackson, his younger brother, Reggie Jackson's one of the starting tackles. I expect him to take an official visit, and we'll see what Kason Myers does because he's a quiet dude, and I can't get in touch with him. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but I know that was a guy that they really liked with Kason Myers. So the quarterback position aside, I would love to talk about what comes next. Because if you're watching the world of college football, it's changed. Covering this for 4 or 5 years now at 247, the weeks of official visits were crazy because that's where the bulk of your commitment came from. When you were, looking at who's going to commit, most of these guys would either, go through all their official visits, then commit after. They'll find that place that just blows them away and commit. It's changing now. And the reasons it's changing is the changing world of college football. For the big programs, they have money to throw around. They're throwing around money, and these players want to gobble that up as fast as they can. But even for schools like BC, it seems like with the, going full rev share, being able to offer all these things, they need to be able to get these guys in earlier too. So it seems like you're looking at a class right now. I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like anywhere between 15 and 20. That's what I'm looking at right now. And right now, BC has, I believe, 8 recruits committed. So that's about half of your class, depending on what they go with. I just posted on Twitter that there's a name coming up. It's a name with power offers. I'm not going to give you any more details on that, but that should be popping up soon. I think you're going to like that one. Okay. I do think after that, we're going to be waiting to hear over the official visit weekends. And there's guys, it depends on like where they're at. But like I mentioned, J.D. Brown and Jace German, both of these guys really like BC. They are very, very high on BC. And there's other guys like that too, that are very high on Boston College. And so that's what we're going to be waiting to see is like who will pull the trigger and when they will do it. And some of that will be the kids wanting to make decisions. Some of that's going to be staff and agents pushing back and forth. It's a complex web. It changes for every kid. It's the way it is. And if you hate it, that's just the world of college football now. Kids are getting paid. Kids are getting money. It's a back and forth, and agents play a big role in all this. They do. They do. So I'm interested to see where Boston College goes next. I look at positions where there's a lot of guys still on their board. I look at a position like edge rusher, defensive tackle, linebacker. These are positions that you look at who's coming for official visits, and there's other names that are still floating around out there. And you're saying to yourself, okay, they really haven't filled those spots up yet. While defensive back, they're going to probably be picky about. Like if you have one defensive back spot, you're going to want to wait for the guy that is at top of your board with that. You do not want to just take it and then miss out on a guy that you really wanted. Because as I said in the last segment, you can't just grab everybody. You can't. It doesn't work that way anymore. So I think, defensive line, edge rusher, I think these are positions to watch for in terms of just when they'll pop. I look at positions like, looking at like wide receivers or tight ends, one that I'd love to watch for because I think they have a bunch of targets that they're looking at. And I think if they got the top guy, there's a bunch that are looking at BC. Who do they end up with there? That'll be something to watch for too. But it's a good problem to have, right? If you had to rebuild everything after a 2-10 season with freshmen, you would be saying the same thing I would be saying 10 years ago. You got to wait 3 more years to figure out what the heck is going to happen with this team. But luckily, through the transfer portal, O'Brien and his staff are hoping and expecting a step forward. Whether you agree with him or not, that's what they're expecting, okay? With these freshmen, it's just adding to the positions that they need. I think that's where things are at right now. All right. Additionally, should also mention baseball before we head out. the last 2 days for BC baseball has not been pretty. It really shows, Georgia Tech going into the series was number 3 in the country. They had over 40 wins. They're one of the favorites to win the College World Series. They have to be. They go out there and they throw, Tanner McKee, I think his name is, and he just blows BC's offense away. Then they score 9 runs. They score 14 on Saturday, on Friday, and it doesn't even look like they're in the same league. It's just tough. Sometimes, I think big picture, it's disappointing because yes, you wanted to be competitive with this team, but take a step back for a second. It stinks. They're still going to get double byes for the ACC tournament where anything can happen. Anything can happen. You just get your staff set the right way and who knows what could happen. And then you're off to the NCAA tournament. And in the grand scheme of things, there's been tons of fun moments. You've seen tons of great performances from players. I think everyone's all in on Todd Instradato now. And you're going to look back on this season, a season where you were projected to finish dead last and if you remember the voting, it was awful. And you're 4th in the ACC. Yes, losing to Georgia Tech in the way that they've been losing has been awful, and it's hard to watch. But the fact this remains that at the end of all this, we're not going to be sitting here going next year going, oh, yeah, that was a great year. But remember that Georgia Tech series? That ruined everything. That's not how this works. Hopefully on Saturday they can get something going and they can pull off one win. That would be nice. But in the end, they've won over 30 games. Thank you for listening. My name is AJ Black. You can follow me on AJ Black 247 on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. I'm on all social medias. You can check me out on 247's Eagle Insider as well, where I'm the editor. We have lots of good stuff up there as well. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you all again soon for Locked On Boston College, your team every day.